It's 3 a.m. and you're standing at a gas station in Huarez, Mexico. The streets are dead silent. Suddenly, a white van pulls up. Inside, 17 people are packed together, exhausted, hungry, and parched after 6 days of travel. But it's not over. They've already paid a hefty price to get this far. Now, the driver, who isn't some humanitarian but a cartel operative, demands more $3,000 per person, or they'll disappear into a stash house. No phone calls, no contact with family. They're gone. This isn't fiction. This is the reality unfolding right now in January 2026. And here's the twist. Mexico has become far more than just a country migrants pass through. It's become the critical choke point in the American migrant crisis, the pressure valve, and it's about to break. Why does this matter to you? Because what happens next won't just reshape America's border. It will define the lives of millions caught in the middle. Stick with me, because this isn't just about a migration crisis. It's about a pattern that Washington refuses to acknowledge, and it's about to collapse in a way we didn't expect. So let's break this down. Mexico isn't just the place where migrants are passing through anymore. It's the one thing standing between the full-scale collapse of the American border system. The situation isn't just about a crisis at the border. It's a ticking time bomb. You're probably asking yourself, how did we get here? And more importantly, why is Mexico the final domino? Here's the truth that no one in Washington wants to admit. The system is already failing. From Turkey to Libya to Guatemala, we've seen the exact same pattern unfold over and over again. When migration bottlenecks collapse, it happens in stages, 4 stages to be precise. Once you understand this, you'll see the writing on the wall. Stage 1, the pressure builds. This is when a country gets forced to act as the border police for another country. Not because they want to, but because they have no choice. In 2025, President Trump gave Mexico an ultimatum: stop migrants or face 25% tariffs on all goods, $600 billion in trade. In a matter of weeks, President Claudia Sheinbaum deployed 10,000 National Guard troops to the southern border with Guatemala. That's when Mexico went from a transit country to an enforcement partner. Overnight. But here's the kicker. When you shut down legal pathways without solving the reasons people are fleeing, the pressure doesn't just disappear. It moves underground. And when it does, stage 2 kicks in. Stage 2, the criminal hijacking. This is when the system gets hijacked by criminals. When legal routes are closed, the illegal ones explode. And between February and July 2025, that's exactly what happened. Border crossings dropped by 93%. Politicians were popping champagne, declaring victory. Crisis solved, right? But here's what they didn't tell you. While the official crossings plummeted, a massive shift was happening under the radar. Mexican citizens, who were once a small percentage of border encounters, now made up 62% of all border crossings. Why? Because the cartels weren't just smuggling migrants. They had become the smugglers themselves. They controlled every plaza on both sides of the border. A plaza, by the way, is cartel slang for a smuggling corridor. And right now, the Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, and the Gulf cartel are not just trafficking drugs anymore. They're trafficking people. And here's the part that will change how you see the entire crisis. According to the University of California, Davis, cartels now make between $6 and $13 billion every year from human trafficking. Let that sink in. $13 billion. That's the price of desperation. When cartels run the migration system, migrants aren't customers. Their inventory. More than 73% of migrants surveyed by the UN in 2025 said they'd been victims of crime in Mexico. Kidnapping, extortion, sexual violence. Just think about that. In Chihuahua State, police freed over 1,200 migrants from cartel stash houses in just 7 months. They were beaten, starved, held hostage, all so their families could wire ransom payments of up to $20,000 per person. This isn't migration. This is a hostage economy, and we're paying for it. Now, this is where it gets even darker. Stage 3, the infrastructure paradox. You might think building more walls is the solution to migration, but the truth, every mile of border barrier doesn't stop migration. It industrializes it. The more you try to make it impossible for people to cross, the more valuable smuggling routes become. And when those smuggling routes become valuable, the cartels tighten their grip. Take a look at what's happening now. The U.S. government just awarded $3.3 billion in new contracts to build smart walls. That's high-tech fencing, cameras, sensors, the whole deal. The Department of Homeland Security is celebrating these as major wins in border security. But here's the part nobody's talking about. They're not building security. They're building cartel profit infrastructure. Every new wall, every new sensor, every new fence makes it more expensive and dangerous to cross. That means the cartels can charge even higher fees to get people across. And when the routes get more dangerous, more people die. Between 2024 and 2025, migrant deaths along the border jumped by 43%, according to the Government Accountability Office. Not because more people are crossing, but because every new barrier makes it more likely that migrants will die trying to find an alternate path. Here's the real kicker. In 2015, it cost about $500 to $3,000 to cross with a smuggler. Today, it's anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. In high-risk areas, that fee can hit $15,000 per person. So if 300,000 people cross in 2025 at an average fee of $5,000, that's $1.5 billion just in smuggling fees. And that's just the beginning. We're not just building walls. We're building a more efficient system for the cartels to profit from human suffering. Stage 4, the system shock. This is when everything breaks. Political pressure, economic desperation, and cartel violence converge in a catastrophic way. It's the moment when a government loses control of its own territory. Thousands of migrants trapped between borders, official numbers looking good on paper, but the human cost is beyond measure. Stages 1 through 3, they're already happening right now, simultaneously. The only question left is when stage 4 hits, because it will. It's not a matter of if anymore, it's when the final domino falls. And make no mistake, Mexico is that last domino. Once enough pressure builds, it won't matter how many walls you build, the system will collapse. Let me take you back to 3 historical moments that many have forgotten, but if you understand them, you'll understand exactly what's coming. First, Turkey and the Syrian refugee crisis of 2015. With Syria in chaos, civil war, chemical weapons, millions fleeing, Turkey suddenly found itself hosting 2.7 million refugees. The EU, terrified of a migration surge, offered Turkey $6 billion in exchange for keeping refugees on Turkish soil. For a while, it worked. But then in March 2016, President Erdogan did something no one expected. He threatened to open the gates, unleashing millions of refugees into Europe unless the EU paid more. And here's the part nobody talks about. Reports later revealed that Erdogan's government wasn't just managing the refugee crisis. They were coordinating with human smuggling networks, not to stop them, but to control them. Turkey didn't solve the crisis. It monetized and weaponized it, and in the process, 5,000 people drowned in the Mediterranean. Look at Mexico in 2026. Do you see the same pattern forming? Now let's look at Libya. In 2017, after the fall of Gaddafi, Libya became a lawless corridor for African migrants trying to reach Europe via the Mediterranean. The European Union, desperate to stop the flow, started funding the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept boats and send migrants back to Libya. But here's the ugly truth. Libya's militias, not government forces, were running the show, and they turned detention centers into slave markets. CNN documented migrants being auctioned for as little as $400 each. $400 for a human life. European governments knew this was happening. Internal EU documents from 2018 revealed they were fully aware of the torture, extortion, and systemic rape that was taking place in Libyan detention centers. But they kept funding it because it was politically necessary to keep migrants out of Europe. Between 2017 and 2019, over 15,000 migrants died trying to cross the Mediterranean. The smuggling networks didn't disappear. They adapted. They raised their prices, found new routes, became more violent and more profitable. And here's the harsh reality. When you deputize security forces in a weak state to enforce migration control, you're not building capacity. You're arming criminal enterprises with government credentials. And right now, Mexico is following the same path. The National Guard, deployed to the southern border, gets paid around $400 a month. Meanwhile, a single migrant can pay cartels anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 to cross. Do the math. There's a massive incentive structure in place, and it's not working in favor of the migrants. Now let's shift focus. Stage 5, the human impact. This isn't just about policies, numbers, or borders. It's about real people, ordinary people caught in the crossfire. Imagine for a second, you're one of those migrants. You've left everything behind, your home, your family, your future. You've been forced into this nightmare because staying at home means death, violence, or starvation. Now, you've paid the cartels, you've crossed the dangerous terrain, but you're stuck in limbo, trapped between two countries, powerless, vulnerable, desperate. And here's where it hits hardest. You're not just a refugee, you're a pawn in a system you didn't create. You're subject to kidnapping, extortion, sexual violence. In 2025, the United Nations found that 73% of migrants in Mexico had been victims of crime, with many facing unimaginable horrors at the hands of the cartels. The sad reality is that this is the human cost of the policies we've set in motion. We like to point to statistics, number of apprehensions, border encounters, migrant deaths, but those numbers don't tell the full story. They don't show the toll on human lives, the suffering that's being silently ignored. If this feels familiar to you, if you've seen this pattern before, or if you can't ignore the faces behind the numbers, let me know in the comments, because whether we like it or not, this is affecting all of us. Now, let's take a step back and look beyond the outrage. Stage 6. Systemic insight. You see, there's a mechanism that's driving this entire crisis, and it's not just about human desperation. It's about power, leverage, fear. The system we've built isn't just a border enforcement operation. It's an industrial complex that relies on the exploitation of human beings. Look at Mexico in 2026. The cartels don't just control smuggling routes. They've integrated themselves into the very structure of migration. When the U.S. builds more barriers, when it ramps up enforcement, it doesn't solve the problem. It just makes the cartels more powerful. They adapt, they raise their prices, they become more violent and more profitable. But this isn't some isolated issue in the desert. This is a global system of migration enforcement. Governments, including our own, have been outsourcing the brutality to criminal organizations. When the U.S. funds Mexico's border enforcement, they aren't just stopping migrants. They're ensuring the cartels continue to thrive. In fact, the U.S. is helping to prop up the very system they claim to fight against. This is where it gets unsettling. The more we militarize borders, the more we empower criminal enterprises. These aren't just criminal organizations, they're parallel governments. They rule regions, they assassinate mayors, they infiltrate police forces, and they don't care about your politics. All they care about is the revenue. Now let's look at what's coming next. Stage 7, the near future trajectory. There are two paths ahead. One leads to further escalation, and the other, well, it's the path we don't want to face. First, let's talk about the escalation. If nothing changes, if the status quo holds, Mexico will continue to bear the brunt of this crisis. The cartels will grow stronger, the violence will spread. Mexico, already a powder keg, will become even more unstable, pushing more migrants into the hands of smugglers and further complicating the border crisis for the U.S. Politicians will point to low apprehension numbers, claiming victory. But the truth is, that's just enforcement theater. The pressure will keep building under the surface, and it'll explode when Mexico can no longer hold it back. But there's another option. It's one that requires a complete shift in strategy. It means addressing the root causes of migration, violent gangs in Central America, economic collapse in Venezuela, and the systemic corruption that drives people to flee in the first place. It's a massive undertaking, but without it, we're simply delaying the inevitable. What happens if Mexico can't hold the line any longer? What happens if the system breaks? We're already seeing the cracks. The only question is how much longer we can ignore them. And now we arrive at the ultimate question. What comes after the crash? We've seen the pattern before. Every time enforcement-only policies are implemented, they lead to temporary drops, but always followed by explosive surges. It's the same story that's played out in Turkey, Libya, and Guatemala. The numbers go down for a while, then within a few years, they shoot back up, often worse than before. This isn't a fluke. It's the result of a broken system. Here's the uncomfortable truth. No matter how many walls we build, no matter how many National Guard troops we deploy, if we don't address the root causes, if we don't stop the violence, stop the poverty, stop the cartel-fueled extraction, we'll just be prolonging the inevitable. This isn't about partisanship. It's about a global system of migration enforcement that has, for too long, outsourced its brutality to criminal organizations. So what can be done? It's simple but difficult. We need to shift our focus from enforcement to a system that provides real solutions, invest in the countries people are fleeing, create legal pathways for asylum, and stop building walls that just make cartels more powerful. Mexico isn't our enemy here. Mexico is a victim of the same system we've created. And when that pressure valve breaks, it won't just be a Mexican crisis, it'll be an American crisis too. In the next video, we'll dive deeper into the cartel networks that control these smuggling corridors, how they launder billions through oil smuggling, and why American companies are complicit in funding these operations. You don't want to miss it. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and let me know in the comments what you think about this crisis. Did I miss anything? What questions do you still have? This conversation is just beginning. The more we understand what's actually happening, the harder it becomes for politicians to hide behind their statistics and their theater. The border isn't where Mexico ends and America begins. The border is where policy meets reality, and reality has been winning for a long time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.